Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Respect. Originally written and recorded by Otis Redding, made iconic by Aretha Franklin, and performed here by tribute band Sisters of Rock, who will be performing at Gregory Plaza in Black Hawk on Saturday, September 14th. More details to follow later on in the podcast. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about Sisters of Rock and other similar projects, Dreamboat Annie, Ladies of the 80s, and The Corporation, then be sure to head to the band's websites at dreamboatanniedenver.com and at thecorporationband.com, where you can check out YouTube videos of more performances. And be sure to check out Sisters of Rock on Facebook. Hello there, everybody! My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to this week's Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. I usually save the promotional announcements until the end of each segment, and I don't think I really have anything I need to announce at this point. So, let's just get right into the interview. Our guest this week. Do you mind introducing yourselves real quick?
I am Sonya Surrett, and I'm from North Carolina, but I've lived in Colorado since 1995.
I'm Scott Rogers. They call me Scottie Blue Sky, and I moved here from Montana in '94.
And you two are involved in the band Sisters of Rock, correct?
Yes.
For additional context involving some of the dates that will be mentioned throughout this interview was initially conducted on August 4th, 2024. And the Sisters of Rock are coming to perform at the Gregory Plaza in Black Hawk as part of a series of shows sponsored by the Black Hawk Hard District.
Yeah, September 14th?
14th.
Yep, so we're excited. It's going to be a good show.
I know I don't have every member of the band on this interview, so can you let us know what your roles in the band are?
I'm the boss, and everybody else listens to me. I'm the bass player, and Sonny is one of the lead singers.
So how did the Sisters of Rock begin? How did you two meet? How did the band start? All that kind of stuff.
I was a sprinkler guy, and I was Sonny's sprinkler guy, and we became more than sprinkler guys, so then she was a musician when I met her, and I was a musician, and we just started doing music together, and then everything just started to evolve, and we had a guy at McCarthy's ask us to put together like an all-star show, and that's how Sisters of Rock evolved. Was we knew a bunch of girls, and we had a bunch of friends, and we invited them along, and we put together a big set list, and all the girls learned their parts, and we just did a big show with all the different girls from around town singing with us.
And originally, when we started it, we did start it with 2 actual sisters and me. So they were sisters. There were 2 sisters and me. So we called it Sisters of Rock. And then we also brought in other girls that were singers that wanted to join as well. So we kind of change our shows up. Sometimes we'll have 2, 3 girls. Sometimes we'll have 4. It just depends on the venue, what they're looking for. But we have rock and roll, Motown, pretty much everything. We do pretty much everything.
So, based on the story that you guys just told me about how your band name came to be, I assume that it has nothing to do with the song Sisters of Rock by Little Sister.
No.
No, we had the original band Dreamboat Annie, which was our heart tribute and also our cover band at the time because it was so new. But we just wanted to do something different, and we just liked the way the Sisters of Rock sounded with all the girls in the band, and we wanted everybody to feel like they're part of the family, and so we just decided Sisters of Rock was just had a good sound to it.
Yeah, we were pretty much when we started out, we were trying to make it kind of a diva show, and we wanted to make it not only female songs, but also just 80s big hair metal songs. We wanted to show that females were badass, basically, that we could sing really anything, and that's kind of how it started. And then with festivals and things like that around town, we had to also make sure we lightened up our show a bit, made it a little more, not as heavy, made it a little more family-friendly, lighter. So we formed a thing called the Ladies of the 80s off of Sisters of Rock, and we have different shows that we do based on Sisters of Rock, so that depending on the venue, if the venue likes it a little more edgy and heavier, we'll go a little more metal with that. If it's a festival and it's families, we go lighter. We'll do Motown, we'll do 80s rock, we'll do pop. It just depends on what we're doing. So
it sounds like the Sisters of Rock was initially started in order to pay tribute to legendary female singers, particularly of the 80s. There's an archive page of a show of Sisters of Rock on September 25th, 2020 from the ticket-selling site Hold My Ticket that advertises them as being a tribute to your female rock faves. So clearly there was an emphasis on female rock stars. But clearly, you've since expanded, as now your website mentions that your set list includes a ton of other modern artists, including Maroon 5 and Adele.
yeah.
It's like we call it the Female Legends show now with the added rock and pop. And because we do the female legends, Pat Benatar, Blondie, Tina Turner, Hart, Donna Summer, we do all those. But then we added the Ladies of the 80s portion of it, which is Metal Health, Bon Jovi, and all those really big 80s songs. And then we've added Pink as part of the show now. We do some Dua Lipa. So there's a lot of range we've done now to include all the female legends from the old to the new.
As a reminder, Scott and Sonya have already mentioned the groups Sisters of Rock, Dreamboat Annie, and Ladies of the 80s. I want to make it clear as well that there is a group called Ladies of the 80s that has their own individual website, but that is not the Ladies of the 80s that is associated with Sisters of Rock and Dreamboat Annie. That is a completely different group in a completely different part of the country. I also wanted to mention really quickly that later on in the interview, we're going to be bringing up another group with a similar lineup, The Corporation. I find it very funny the timing of when I'm releasing this particular podcast interview. The day that I am releasing this is September 6th, close to midnight on September 7th. But on September 5th, Linkin Park announced that they were reuniting with a new female vocalist. This female vocalist, Emily Armstrong, previously in the group Dead Sarah, is filling in for the vocalist role after the death of Chester Bennington in 2017. So I can't help but wonder, since Emily has her own group in Dead Sarah, and she'll now be adding her voice to both original Linkin Park songs from before she joined and new Linkin Park songs in the new album From Zero coming out in November, will you two end up adding Linkin Park to your set list at some point? And maybe even Dead Sarah? I personally would love to see it. Anyway, speaking of that set list, you guys do a lot of covers tributing a lot of artists over 6 decades. Do you throw in any originals in Sisters of Rock?
No, no originals in this show.
Yeah.
This is specifically just a family-friendly Sisters of Rock tribute show, and that's what we do.
Yeah, the only place I've ever done, I have lots of originals, but my originals are more like coffee house. It's something that we wouldn't do with this group, so I tend to do it with my trios.
And I
do it with our trios.
And I come from in the early 90s when we were signed. We were opening for Corrosion of Conformity and Typo Negative. And so I come from the way heavier side of life than most of the band. So the stuff that we've done like that don't really mix with what we're doing in this.
Right.
I wanted to mention here that I talked to Scott after the interview to ask him what the band was that he toured with in the 90s. He told me the name of the band, but I'm not going to mention it for a big reason. Apparently, some quite crazy happenings ended up going on with the band behind the scenes late in their career, and the band has honestly been wiped off the face of the internet. So even though Scott does mention that he toured with that band in the 90s just to give a sense of his music career, he doesn't really go into specifics that much, at least in public. But keep in mind that he opened for Typo Negative. That'll come into play later. Anyway, back to both of your music careers now with the tribute bands that you focus on. The set list is huge, and I imagine that it consists of a lot of artists, particularly female artists, that have inspired both of you over the years.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Heart's the big one, and our biggest show is the Dreamboat Annie Heart of Zeppelin show, and Sonny's the specific lead singer in that one, and that's the one we did last night at the Tacoma Music Festival, and it is just all the Heart hits and the Zeppelin hits. So they did Crazy on You Barracuda, because that's our big draw, is Sonny doing Ann Wilson. That's our biggest show. It's the one we do at theaters the most, and it's the one that we sell the most because she's spot on Ann Wilson, and so that's our big one.
I find it so funny too, because when I was younger, before I started playing in bands, my people that I went to were Sarah McLachlan, Jewel, that kind of thing, and more singer-songwriter stuff, and my voice was softer, and now over the years I've really grown to love the heavier stuff, the more of the rock and roll, even country. Had somebody told me I would be singing Heart, I just assumed when I was younger that I could never sing like that. But over time, we've just worked it to where I never say never anymore. I can pretty much try almost anything and usually do it. So now I focus on things like Heart and Evanescence and Hailstorm and all these great ladies.
She doesn't just try. People call me and say, hey, can we book your show? And I ask them which one, and every answer is the one with the brunette lead singer. I mean, she doesn't just try. She's really that good. She just will never say it.
No.
By the way, in case you don't know much about Heart as a whole, Ann Wilson is the lead vocalist of that group, and Dreamboat Annie, this tribute group, takes its name from the 1975 Heart album of that name. So for you two, how did your musical journey start in general in the first place?
Hey, Sonny, you go first.
Well, I have always played piano and drums since I was a kid.
Amazing drummer. Amazing drummer.
Good meter maid. But again, I just never thought about being in band. When I got older, I was out one night and I saw these people playing in bands, and I just thought to myself, how do people get in bands? And I was literally sitting there having a drink just thinking, how do people get in bands? And I had just bought a $6,000 electronic drum set and couldn't wait to get home to play it. And they had karaoke that night. I sang a Heart song, Dog and Butterfly. And the guy came up, the guitar player came up and said, wow, you really have a good voice. And I said, well, thank you. And I said, but you know what? I really can't wait to get home because I bought a drum set that I can't wait to play. He was like, do you play drums? And I was like, I'm all right. I need to get back into it. And he was like, well, we might be looking for a drummer. And I was like, oh. And he said, can I come over and we run some songs? And I was scared to death because I'd never been in a band, never played drums for anybody, and he came over and I had a little studio in my house and he played some songs and I literally didn't know anything. I just kind of played whatever felt right. And he said, I think that'll do. And then probably about a month and a half, 2 months later, he calls me and he said, we have a gig coming up in a couple of weeks at the garage downtown. Would you be able to do it? And I was blown away and scared to death. I had to learn 40 songs, lickety split. it with the drums, and I did, and I had this little, I don't know what they were called, the little Walkmans that you wore on your arms, like the MP3 players. So I literally put every single song on there, and in between every single break, I went outside and listened to them, the beginnings and endings of every song, just so I could play that night. And I was scared to death. But after that, a few years went by with them where I played drums. They figured out I could sing. I started singing with them. And then time went by, and I met Scottie, and he said one night when we were at Little Bear, after watching a tribute band, I said, we should try this.
I said we should try this. You had nothing to do with it.
And he said, you could do Heart. And I said, yeah, maybe. And in 4 days, we had a tribute band, and they were practicing, and we were like, wow, I guess this is really going somewhere. And then we just created more and more products over the years based on things that we all love to do.
The difference in the story there is she didn't have a clue about any of that. And she played drums and nobody knew who she was. And I was like, I called friends and we called different people. And literally in a week we had things put together. And I was playing originals around town, and we just did a big opening show at McNichols Arena outside. Remember the Denver Daredevils when they were in town? They were a roller skating professional team. We opened for their big thing. And so I knew people, but we literally just put it together. And I was never going to be a musician because my dad told me I wasn't smart enough to be a musician. So I'd blown out my knee and I had babies when I was young. So my first wife went and got me a guitar from the pawn shop, and it wasn't a guitar. It was a little short scale bass. And all my friends came over while I was rehabbing my knee, and they taught me how to play bass because there was too many guitar players. And then we were playing a hot dog stand in Spokane when the guys from Kingdom Come went by and liked us, gave us their management company, and 2 months later we were signed and touring. And that's how I ended up in Denver. Was I liked it here while we were touring, and I ended up down here. Then I met Sunny one day, and we just connected, and I was surprised because she never sang. And then one night she sang karaoke, and I'm like, holy crap, and off we went. And that's where we've been ever since, 14 years now.
I think David, the drummer in Sisters of Rock, he's been with Evermore with Danny Masters for many years, and the bass player as well, Greg.
So,
yeah.
I want to be able to shout out more people from the lineup. So, as a clarification, there's you, Scott, there's you, Sonya, there's the drummer, David, there's the bass player, Greg, who I'll bring up again in a little bit here. Who else should we mention?
So Dave Harms is the drummer, and he's been in a bunch of big bands around town. Michael Taggart is our keyboard player, and he's been in a bunch of bands in town. And then Rob Warnke was the very first person we brought in right after we formed, and he's been with us for 12 years now, and he's the guitar player, and he's been around the cover scene in this town for a long time. And then for this show, we have different girls doing different shows, but for this show, we're going to bring in
Lizzie.
Oh, yeah, Lizzie, and she's in some shows around this town, too.
She does the Nothing But 90s. It's amazing. And then she also interned with MTV, so she's a pretty smart gal. She's amazing.
Yeah, so that's how we put them together, and depending on who's available.
And then we have our keyboard player, Michael Taggart.
I tried that.
Oh.
Yeah, I got everybody. Oh, so that's it. That's all of us. There's 6 or 7 depending on what show we do.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see Ryan Smiley as well, depending on when she can make it. She flies back from Florida to here, so we go with whatever her schedule is.
So, to clarify again, there's drummer David, there's keyboard player Michael, there's guitar player Rob, there's bass player Greg Blankenship, who will not be playing in the Black Hawk show. Robin Jones is also involved in singing backup vocals in a couple lineups of these groups, particularly in The Corporation, which again we'll talk about later. And then there's Ryan Smiley and the woman that was mentioned earlier, Lizzie Sneed, who also is part of the group Nothing But 90s, which has their own website, Nothing But 90s Band. That's Nothing But 90s the word, not 90s, band.com. They also have an Instagram account, Nothing But 90s. Again, that's the word 90s, not 90s. So, out of curiosity, what is the background of those other members?
They've all just been cover players around the Denver area. Taggart was in a band called Liquor Biscuit for years. Rob's been in a ton of them. Dave Harms was in the Danny Masters band for a long time.
And Greg was too.
Oh, Greg's not playing this show, so he doesn't.
Oh, that's right.
So
yeah,
he's not in the band for this show. So.
Gotcha. Gotcha. We switched them out.
Sonny's just mentioning everybody we play with, but no. So that's it. Literally, they just people we just met who have come over, and almost all of them have joined because they've heard Sonny sing, and they've all just wanted to play with Sonny. So she's our big draw, and that's how we stay busy.
Yeah, and I think Lizzie just has the one thing, and she's always had that one thing. She does play guitar, and Ryan didn't have any kind of experience. I think she had theater before she met us years ago, but she pretty much didn't. She had never been in a band before she met us, and now she's amazing. So
I know that the primary focus of this interview is supposed to be on Sisters of Rock and the cover bands that you guys focus on, but I like deep diving into everybody's musical backgrounds, and so I am very curious. Sonya, are you thinking about releasing any of your original material at some point in the future?
like to someday. I just haven't sat down to do it. I have all the original recordings. I have an actual recorder, an actual system that I have all the original stuff recorded on that I would like to take into somebody like Mark Derryberry or one of the, maybe even Colorado Sound at some point and get it done. But I just haven't had time. I have a lot of songs. So it would be something I would want to release for sure. I just haven't had a chance to do it. I've played them out at the Walnut Room. I've played them before. I've played them at anything from coffee shops to little places with my friends. And I've played with Rob Drapkin. I've played with Pete from Storytime. Court and Beth McCumber. They're huge. I've even played with Matthew Moon at one point. So it's just not stuff that we would do with Sisters of Rock. So it's more stuff that is very easy listening and singer-songwriter kind of stuff. So I might play some stuff out at like Gaylord Rockies, stuff like that. It would work really well there, places like that.
And Scott, what about you? Any plans to release any of your own music in the near future?
No, we were signed, and that's what I did, was traveled and just did music in the early 90s. And then when that ended, it was the time to come down here, and that all went away, and I moved here and started over. And after doing that for so many years, it wasn't anything at that time I wanted to do, because I just started a new company down here, Blue Sky Sprinkler, and I was just busy, starting a new life and starting a new company. And so the music got put away for a long time, and I really wasn't doing any music at all until I met Sonny again, and then that's when I started back up.
It was pretty funny. One of the last times I was in a studio, I walked in and there was a picture of you on the wall. With one of your bands.
I know. Oh,
I was like,
Montgomery,
that's my hubby.
Montgomery Park. Yeah, the Montgomery Park one.
Yeah, he had a big picture in there.
Yeah, so no, I've done a bunch of stuff with everybody. Back in the day, I did with a bunch of people in the town who all ended up going to Nashville or doing things. But then just the family life and the business life just put it away for a while. And then when it was time to start over with Sonny, we just decided to do it easy and have fun with it. So we just did the tribute show, and then that turned into a cover band, and that turned into the Sisters Rock. So we've got Dreamboat Annie's full time. We do probably 20 gigs a year with Dreamboat Annie. Sisters Rock is 20 gigs a year, and then the corporation's another 10 or 15 gigs a year. So we do anywhere from 40 to 50 gigs a year between those three bands.
Now, I like the corporation because I'm the drummer in that one usually. We just changed it. I've been the drummer. How long have we had the corporation? Since 2014?
10 years.
Yeah, so I've been the drummer in that band since 2014. But this year we're going to change, and we're going to put David on drums, and I'm going to be lead singer. So that's kind of a new adventure for the corporation. That's our corporate dance band that we're doing. So that'll be fun, I think.
And as I mentioned earlier, there were other events that occurred after Scott and that band stopped touring that ended up making some of that music not happen. Okay, so clearly you two are focused on the cover bands primarily at this point in your musical career. So I want to tailor my normal question of why do you keep coming back to the writing process a little differently this time around? What is different about writing and performing your own original material primarily versus performing covers primarily? Are there pros and cons to both? Is there one that you prefer? How are they different?
Well, being originals, unless you're signed or you're in a band that's bigger, it's a weird scene here, and you don't play for big crowds. And if you're a singer-songwriter, you're mostly just doing it for yourself unless you've moved on. But when you turn into a successful cover band or tribute band like the Sisters of Rock has played Dillon Amphitheater. We've headlined Parker Days. We've headlined Taste of Colorado. We played all these huge, amazing shows. One of the very last Taste of Colorados, when Dreamboat Annie headlined it, there was probably 4,000 people standing in front of Sonny. As a singer-songwriter in Denver, you're going to go play for 12 people, 100 people. It's a whole different thing unless you make it to that next stage. But with the covers, if you have a successful cover band or a successful tribute band like we have, we did the Kona Music Festival last night, and the crowd was huge. Parker Days. We're playing in front of big crowds, and we're making good money, and people are having fun. And the tribute scene has really taken over the music scene in Denver, where the tribute tribute acts and shows are the biggest ones because people want to see them. And people like that because they're not able to see those acts very often or for the right price. Like Heart was coming through town before she got sick, and they were $400 or $500 tickets at Red Rocks, where you can come see Sonny almost spot on, Duane Wilson, for $10, $15, or free at a festival.
Well,
Go ahead. You wanted to talk? Go.
We do bigger shows than that. Anyway.
I just said we did big shows.
Anyway, I have a totally different take on that. So just so you understand, Heart was something that I knew more of, I guess, than, say, Zeppelin. So as far as on the cover side, doing covers, the one thing that I really like about it is for certain artists that you really, really love and that are very hard to learn and to mimic, because Robert Plant is really hard to mimic. Doing a whole Zeppelin night was one of the hardest things I've ever had to learn to do. But once you learn it and you get into it and you know you've got your fan base that loves that band anyway, it transports you to a different place. Like literally, when we do just a Heart show, I am Ann Wilson as far as I'm concerned on stage. That's how it feels to me. And I'm doing those songs as if I wrote them. And I'm tributing her as if she's the greatest thing on the face of the planet. Same thing with Zeppelin. When I do Zeppelin, I don't even know if I even see the crowd out there totally. I am in that moment when I'm doing Zeppelin. And the same thing with a lot of the other songs. You know, you sing these songs that you've heard growing up and all these artists that you love, that when you sing these songs and the people out front see it and they love that song, they grew up with that song, they just want to have a good time, they want to feel that joy. That's kind of what you give them. Now, with originals, I was actually pretty afraid to play my originals, but I remember the first time I ever played them, I went to the Ice House up in Evergreen. And I don't know if it's not called the Ice House anymore. It's literally right beside Little Bear, little coffee shop. And I was scared to death to play anything in front of anybody at this time. This was before I even played drums. This was before I was in a band. This was just when I didn't have any confidence or anything. We played our originals, and I remember the coffee house was all buzzing with conversation. Everybody was there. We were setting up, and as soon as we started playing, you could hear a pin drop in that place. And so that's the difference. Yeah, unless you get well known or whatever, you're not going to make a lot of money. The reason that you do originals is because it's your originals. It's something that came out of you. You just want to share it with everybody, and you just hope that everybody likes it. And you never know. You never know if everybody's going to like it or dig it. But evidently that night when I did it, they did. I was worried that they didn't like it, but when I realized that they all were focused on listening instead of talking, they were all drinking their coffee and listening, that was really cool. I thought that was really, really cool. So we do it for I do it for different reasons. When I do my originals, I do it because I want to bring something to you that's from me, personal. When I do the covers, I want to see your eyebrow go up. I want to see you say, I want to see that unspoken thing in you that says, wow, she really did that well, or wow, she hit that note really good. That brings me back to the past. I can almost feel like I'm hearing the person. So that's why I do the covers. So that's just me though.
You know what? I am actually still curious about my usual question. So I'll ask it now. What sticks out to you about the writing process? And what sticks out to you about figuring out how to perform covers?
For me, writing, a lot of people write off of lyrics, and I've written tons of poetry, things from my childhood, whatever. I actually find that it's easier to come up with an actual melody of something first before you look at any kind of words, because you need to know the feel of the song and where it's going. So like, I'll come up with a ditty on the piano, or I'll come up with a little drum beat in my head. And once I have that, if I have a melody at all, I can pretty much come up with a song in about 20 minutes, because you know whether it's fast or whether it's slow, whether it's country, whether it's rock. You kind of know from the beat and the melody where you're going with it. So for me, it's easier to write like that. If somebody just brings me lyrics, that's really hard to write from lyrics. It's really hard, in my opinion. Learning covers, pretty much I just listen to them until I learn them basically from osmosis, just listening to them over and over and over again. Now that we have YouTube, if I need to learn to see what I'm missing on drums, I'll watch someone else do it, and I might pick up something there that I didn't get originally from listening to it. But you just pretty much give it your spin, and you try to hit all the changeovers as best you can. You try to hit all the major stuff that everybody that knows that song is going to be looking for. And I truly believe in not changing things too much, because the people that come out to see you, they really want to see if they're going out to see Heart, they want to hear it the way that they remember it and the way that they sing it and the way that they know it. If we were to go out there and change every single song the way that we want to do it or whatever, it just wouldn't be the same. So our tributes, we try to tribute that person as best we can. With Sisters of Rock, we do the best we can to mimic their voices. We do the best we can to play it the way that it should be played. And we try to give that feeling to the people that come out. So, do you want to say about your writing?
Nope.
Okay. That's how I feel about that.
And is there anything that has stuck out to you over all of this time that you have been musicians about performing live, especially for these cover bands? Do you have a favorite part?
I think...
The favorite part?
Yeah.
Oh, just the reaction in the crowds. We just played so many great festivals and we play so many good gigs that we're playing in front of 400 or 500 people, 1,000 people, 2,000. Mm-hmm. And people enjoy it and they're always in a good mood and it's just always a happy kind of thing. And the crowds are good. And so it's just joyful to do it in a good, happy kind of thing because that's what, when we look out and our friends are dancing and people are cheering and you hear people like, oh my God, she's amazing. It's just a happy moment because that's what you're there for. You're there to bring these people a moment of happiness from a memory or just because it's a fun place to be at the time.
Well, and with the tribute, so the corporation is a funk dance band, corporate dance band. Then we have our tribute bands, which are concert oriented. So we want you to feel like you're coming to a concert with those, with the Heart, the Zeppelin, the Journey, the Duran Duran that we do, and the Sisters of Rock. That's more like a diva show. We want those to be an experience. So we would like for people to feel like they're having an experience, not just a, hey, let's go out and have a few drinks and dinner and watch some people sing or whatever. We really want people to look forward to coming out to seeing that certain product, whatever it is, because they know, they feel in their hearts that they're going to have a good time, that it's going to be worth it, and that it's going to bring them an experience, good memories. Basically, building memories is what we want to do with it.
And particularly from the Sisters of Rock shows, is there anything that you hope audience members will be able to take away when they come and see you guys?
Wow, they've worked really hard to be really good, and wow, she was amazing, and wow, they really did all those songs well. We want people to just walk away thinking, wow, that was really a cool show because we have put the time and effort in to make it a really cool show and to make it worth coming out to. And the time involved in putting together a show where you're doing it truthfully. You're playing Benatar the way she's supposed to be done. You're playing Heart the way it's supposed to be done. And people walk away from that with that, wow, that was really good. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, we're hoping that they like it, that the tonality is good, that everything is good. And I actually personally like, too, that families enjoy it, too. Like, I love seeing when we do festivals and you've got the little kids up there. Oh, my God. That's, like, my favorite.
We did Fair Play 4th of July.
Oh, my God.
And we had these two little girls
so precious
who were, like, 4 or 5 years old in front of the stage. And they were channeling the old hippies from the 60s with their arms. And it was such the happiest moment of the whole summer was them kids dancing at Fair Play and just like being in the moment and the adults and everybody. And it was just, that was our happy moment was that. And
you know, their parents probably grew up on some of these songs and so they're rocking out and they're having a good time. So it's really good. We just like to have fun. There's a lot of weirdness in the world right now. So this is our joy.
Yep. Our happy place.
Yep. It's our happy place.
Focusing for a second on the Gregory Plaza show that's coming up. It seems like it's a bit of a smaller audience than you're used to.
It's in the middle. I mean, it just depends, you know, from Dillon Amphitheater was huge, Parker Days was huge. But like last week we did Bruce Brothers' 6th anniversary show and
it was intimate.
It was intimate, but there was 200 or 300 people sitting on their outside lawn.
Yeah.
Just really getting into the music. So it's not really about the, you know, we don't want to play to 4 people, but if it's 100 or 200 and the place is having a good time, it's about the enjoyment of it and the having fun with your band members and looking out at the crowd and seeing them smile and not mattering the size. Every crowd is more about the happiness than it is that because you play intimate little private gigs. And if those 100 people are having fun and smiling and joking, then that makes it all worthwhile.
You can have tiny and mighty crowds.
Tiny and mighty crowds.
Tiny but mighty.
Tiny but mighty. That's it right there.
Or you can have huge ones that you're just like, oh my God, it's awesome. But the show always goes on. So
you put the same amount of effort into every show, no matter how big or small.
That's right.
At this point, Sonya ended up asking me, and probably Scott to a certain extent as well, if we knew what the vibe of the Gregory Plaza shows was like. And Scott jumped in and mentioned that this series is a brand new series.
It's a brand new show. It's a brand new series. it's brand new. They're trying it. So it takes a couple of years for them to grow them. So the lady who's putting it together is very nice. And so we're excited about it. So it's a new experience.
I like it. Yeah. It's an adventure.
Yep.
It's at this point that I want to acknowledge the hard work of Lisa Spencer of the Mountain Poppy Boutique for organizing all of these shows and putting this series together. We'll talk more about her in a bit. All right, we're going to start winding up the interview at this point, and I have to ask, Sonya, you've said that you've been thinking about releasing your own original material, and Scott, you've essentially said that you've moved on from some of that original material. But in regards to what you're doing now for the Sisters of Rock, for Dreamboat Annie, for the Ladies of the 80s, and for the Corporation, do you have any plans to release tribute albums, or are the licensing fees a bit too hefty?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
Probably too, yeah.
You can't,
I think, so you're pretty much covered with most places that you play because almost every place and every event has a cabaret license or they have the licensing to cover bands. But like if you started to put it on some type of album or whatever, then you're making profit from that, and that's when it becomes something that is different.
Even trying to release something like that on YouTube is hard because the licensing fees, and it's really almost impossible to pull that off. So for us, it's just a live show that we just go spend the evening doing.
Yeah.
And we walk away with it with a bunch of happy people and new friends.
Yeah.
And it's not about the radio or any of that because we've all done that in the past. Mm-hmm. Now it's just about going out on a Friday night or a Saturday night and giving joy to those 100 to 1,000 people who show up for whatever reason they're there.
And I think when you're a musician, you're just always going to find some way to do it. So you're either going to be in a band or you're going to write music or you're going to produce sound for somebody, or at some point, if you do music, if you have music in you, you're going to find some way to do it. And this is kind of what we do. We like to perform.
And we're old. So.
You're only as old as you think you are.
This is the end of the 4x400 race.
So.
You can tell I've been watching the Olympics.
Yeah, you have been.
I will mention this. I promoted local tribute band Rolling Harvest in the previous episode of the podcast. They have a live show on Friday, September 13th, starting at 8 p.m. at the Gold Hill Inn, located at 401 Main Street, by the way. Check out that previous episode of the podcast if you want to learn more. Anyway, one of the big things that I ended up promoting from Rolling Harvest, who focus completely on Bob Dylan and Neil Young covers emulating the Colorado sound, so to speak, is their Bandcamp, where they have released a bunch of performances that they've done in the past completely free of charge. So I'm sure there are ways to be able to release work like this. And heck, Sisters of Rock have even uploaded some of their stuff to YouTube. I'll talk more about that in a bit here. But before I wrap up the big promotional stuff where I mention where everybody can find you guys and more information about all these groups, is there anything else I forgot to cover?
No, you did really good and you covered everything really well. So, what is it? They're calling it the Hard District. And like I said, the lady put it together and she's very nice. And I just think it's going to be a fun show because it's the right time of year for a new venue like that to try it out. It's a great time and it's a great season. So no, we're just excited to go give something new in a new area.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
You can make fun of the husband-wife thing on the podcast. So everybody does it. Me and Sonny have been doing shows together for 14 years now. And there's always a little funniness because we are married and that does change the dynamic a little bit when you're loading in, loading out and doing shows. So, but 14 years later, we're still doing them together and
still the boss.
I'm still the boss.
People that know Scottie know that if he picks on them, he really likes them and he picks on me the most, so.
He always tells people, if Scottie doesn't pick on you, it's because
he doesn't like you. Anyway, that's so funny.
As I mentioned before, this interview was initially conducted on August 4th, 2024. We've been talking for almost an hour at this point. It's starting to transition into the evening, and we're all ready for dinner at this point, particularly Sonya and Scott, who are excited to tune in to the newly aired Season 2 finale of House of the Dragon.
I'm ready for some dragons.
Right? Me too. Oh yeah, the season finale.
Season finale.
Oh, we're huge Game of Thrones fans, so.
House of Dragon.
House of Dragons.
Good.
And Marvel. Have you gone and seen the new Deadpool yet?
It's funny. That's hilarious.
Oh my God, it is. Yeah. So
hilarious.
I did mention to Scott and Sonya that Deadpool and Wolverine was coming to the Backdoor Theater very soon, and I did advertise it on the podcast. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to catch up on the first two films, and so I didn't end up seeing that one. Oh well, maybe some point in the near future. Before we completely wrap up this interview, though, Scott ended up turning the interview on me.
Okay, so I got one question for you. How old are you?
I told him I'm 22 years old.
That's awesome.
I was going to guess 23 or 24, but I was close. How did they find you?
I completely understand that the subject of the interview is not me. I have never wanted to make these interviews primarily about me, but there is a reason that I am including Scott's turning around of the interview on me in this interview of the podcast. So, to give complete context, I'll quickly retell the story of how I ended up joining the Mountaineer. On April 30th, 2019, I received an email forwarded to me from Scott Baki, father of Netherlands graduate Towns Baki, who, by the way, I've actually interviewed for the podcast before. He was the Ski Meister champion of Netherlands in 2022, so you can check out episode 47 of the podcast to hear from him. Anyway, he and I were friends because we were both involved in theater, and we were both involved in the 2019 Netherlands production of the musical Chicago. Scott, as well as our editor-in-chief, Barbara Hart, ended up forwarding this email to a bunch of people asking if somebody could quickly write an article promoting the show now that it was done performing. I had apparently been thinking about writing for the Mountaineer for a bit, but I had never gotten the opportunity to actually sit down and write an article for them. So I decided, let's see how this goes. So, the first article I ever wrote for the Mountaineer, Chicago Dazzles Audiences, was ultimately published in the May 2nd, 2019 print edition of the Mountaineer. And of course, you can find the article on the Mountaineer website. Barbara liked my writing enough that she ended up asking me to write more articles for the paper about local events, about theater, about sports in the Netherlands area. I think 2021 was really the year that cemented my status here at the Mountaineer. I was given the music column, Music of the Mountains, for the first time as a brand new idea, and the co-anchors of the podcast at that time, Cynthia Davis and Art DeVartalis, called me and asked me if I wanted to contribute to the podcast. Now, jump ahead here to September 2024, and I am completely in charge of the podcast and still loving every second of the Music of the Mountains column. Again, I really don't want most of these interviews to focus on me. I was the subject of an interview in one of the podcast episodes. For the record, that episode was episode 35, aired on October 25th, 2021, if you actually want to hear more from me. But I really do primarily keep most of the stories that I tell to other guests, specifically to the interview conducted at the time. But again, there is a reason that I decided to include all of this context and all of Scott flipping the interview on me. And here is that reason.
That is. Yeah, you always meet somebody and they interview you. And then one day we were on the road with Typo Negative. Peter Steele they were huge. They were like Ministry, Corrosion of Conformity, Typo Negative. They were the three big metal bands in the early 90s that were the biggest ones of that genre. And so they were huge, and that's who I toured with. But we were being interviewed one day, and Peter Steele, the lead singer for Typo Negative, he's 6'8" and he wears heels, so he's 7'2" with his heels on. And he looked at the guy interviewing him and he said, you know what? We're going to do this different today. He says, we're going to interview you. And then afterwards, he's like, whenever you're done with the interviews, you should always ask the people interviewing you about them. And so that's why I've always, ever since doing that in the 90s, I've always asked the people who I've talked to, how did you do this? Because it's always interesting to hear the same story from the other side. You know, you want to know, it's interesting how everybody gets where they're at for a reason. And Peter Steele was a manic depressive, and he died of a drug thing a few years ago. But funny story, we were on tour with him, and they pulled me out of they asked me to come talk to him. And I said, okay. So I go outside, and they hold me down, and they spray paint my blonde hair black because they didn't want somebody who looked like they were in Poison on tour with them. Yeah, so that's why, but he was really amazing, and he was an incredible person, and he used practical jokes as a offset for his manic depressive. But that was the best advice he ever gave, was when you're done with the interview, ask them about them.
I am personally flattered that Scott ended up asking that. But again, as a clarification, the big reason that I wanted to include that is not because of my story, but because of the story that ultimately resulted from that happening. I just thought it was a really cool story, and I did also want to shout out Peter Steele really quickly, who, as Scott already mentioned, unfortunately succumbed to addiction on April 14th, 2010 at the age of 48. Anyway, now we're actually wrapping up with the big interview part of this podcast, and I told Scott and Sonya that this is around the time that I would promote their show at Gregory Plaza.
We've got one show this week, and then we're going to start heavy on that promotion here soon because she just sent me posters, and so we're going to start that promotion really heavy here soon.
I mentioned that I would come back to Mountain Poppy Boutique's Lisa Spencer. And here is the time where we're finally going to do that. As the final portion of this interview section, we ended up talking about the Gregory Plaza. If it also hosted opera, I mentioned that the final show of this Black Hawk Hard District sponsored series will be 2 opera singers performing. And then Scott ends up transitioning into the history of how this series came to be.
They hired, a couple of years ago, they hired somebody to book that stuff, and they got rid of them. Somebody else didn't do that. So this year, she just took it upon herself just to do it because they couldn't find anybody else to do it. So, yeah. And Sunny was playing the Grand Z one night, and Lisa saw her there and called us the next day and said, I love your band. I love the brunette singer. Can I hire you guys for this show? So,
Excited to hear it. So thank you for promoting.
Yeah.
I wanted to include that particular section in this interview, but I didn't know if that was behind the scenes stuff that should stay off the general public record. So I called Lisa Spencer to confirm some of this information, and she mentioned that the original person who promoted this series did not get fired. He resigned on his own terms to focus on his own personal life. That being said, Lisa did end up being the sole person taking on responsibility for organizing this series of shows. So, shout out to Lisa Spencer for organizing all of these shows sponsored by the Black Hawk Hard District. And now that we've all talked each other's ears off, it's finally time to wrap up.
We're going to eat dinner and watch House of Dragons.
I mean, hey, to me that sounds like a fun night.
When you're as old as we are, that is a fun night.
In retrospect, I realized that I should have mentioned that I always eat dinner watching murder mysteries with my parents, but I didn't. So, if you two are listening to this final interview, it's a fun night for me too. Thank you so much to Scott and Sonya for coming on board and joining us for the podcast. You can see the Sisters of Rock performing live at the Gregory Plaza, located approximately at 317 Gregory Street. That exact address is actually where Mountain Poppy Boutique is located, but the Gregory Plaza is close to there. 317 Gregory Street is in Black Hawk, and this series of shows is sponsored by the Black Hawk Hard District, which, by the way, you can learn more about by going to blackhawkharddistrict.com. Anyway, the Sisters of Rock will be the second to last show of this series, and they'll be performing on Saturday, September 14th, 2024, starting at 5 p.m. If you want to learn more about each iteration of the group that we talked about in this particular episode, Sisters of Rock, Ladies of the 80s, Dreamboat Annie, and The Corporation, then be sure to head to the band's websites at thecorporationband.com, where you can learn more about The Corporation, Sisters of Rock, and Dreamboat Annie in particular, and also head to dreamboatanniedenver.com, where you can check out more about that particular tribute group. Both of these websites also have links to YouTube videos of all of these groups that you can check out. And finally, you can also check out Sisters of Rock on their Facebook page. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned in to this week's Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. If you want to share this episode around with whoever you see fit, or other episodes of this podcast, then be sure to head to the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com or to the mtnear.com/the-mountain-ear-podcast to share these episodes around. And if you would like to be involved in this peak-to-peak centered podcast and you're a member of the Peak to Peak area, if you would like to be interviewed or you have advertising you want us to put on the podcast, then be sure to email me at media@themountaineer.com and we'll get that sorted for you. Have a great rest of your day!
Left to good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. Hell never knows what's leading to sleeping. At the way that things line up.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Proud Mary, originally written by John Fogerty, performed by his band Creedence Clearwater Revival, made even more iconic by Ike and Tina Turner, and performed here by tribute band Sisters of Rock, who you can see live on Saturday, September 14th at the Gregory Plaza in Blackhawk as part of a series of shows sponsored by the Blackhawk Hard District. To learn more about the Blackhawk Hard District, be sure to visit their website at blackhawkharddistrict.com and learn more about Sisters of Rock, as well as other projects Dreamboat Annie, Ladies of the 80s, and The Corporation by going to their websites at thecorporationband.com and dreamboatanniedenver.com. And finally, be sure to check out more of Sisters of Rock by checking out YouTube videos that are available on both of the previously mentioned websites and by going to their Facebook page.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.